Before we dive into the heart of the story, I'd appreciate it if you could hit that like and subscribe button. Now, let's talk about something that's been on my mind. You see, when it comes to life, there's always some kind of endgame. Some people seem to know exactly where they're headed right from the start, like they've got a clear roadmap guiding them every step of the way. Others, though, well, they just go with the flow. They take life as it comes, trusting that things will somehow work out. The big question here is, which one are you? Do you set clear goals and map out how to reach them? Or are you the type to let things unfold naturally? Me? I'm all about planning. My name's Ethan, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that spontaneity rarely leads to the best results. I've always been the kind of person who likes to know exactly what I'm aiming for. Whether it's in my career, my personal life, or even something as simple as my weekend plans, I need to have a clear idea of what I want to achieve. It gives me control, and control makes me feel secure. But hey, don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with my entire life story or hit you with long-winded descriptions of what I look like. That's not my style. Just picture me as your average guy, you know? A regular dude with a bit of a wild side. I'll let your imagination fill in the rest. As for my wife, Emily, well, she's a great woman. We've been married for a while now, and we've built a life together that, on the surface, looks pretty solid. But here's the thing. Sometimes, things aren't as perfect as they seem. You see, I've always had a higher libido than most guys. It's just the way I'm wired. At first, it wasn't really an issue. But as the years passed, I started feeling a little restless. Don't get me wrong, I love Emily. I really do. But over time, our relationship, especially in the bedroom, started to feel predictable. The same old routine, day in and day out. It's like we were stuck on autopilot, and while that works for a lot of people, it doesn't really work for me. Now, being the logical thinker I am, I didn't want to just let this feeling of restlessness grow and fester. I wanted to take action, but I also didn't want to do anything reckless. I tried to talk to Emily about spicing things up a bit. I suggested we try some role-playing, maybe introduce a few new tricks in the bedroom. But Emily, well, she just wasn't into it. She's more traditional, I guess. She didn't really see the need for all those extras, and after a few months of trying to get her on board, I realized that this wasn't going to change. So, I did what I do best. I came up with a plan. I made a conscious decision to seek excitement outside of my marriage. Now, I know what you're thinking. An affair? That's a pretty big step. And you're right. It wasn't something I took lightly. I'm not the kind of guy who acts on impulse, especially when it comes to something as serious as this. I took my time with it. I weighed the pros and cons. I set clear goals for what I wanted out of this affair and how I was going to go about it. It's not that I don't love Emily, because I do. But sometimes, love isn't enough to keep that fire burning. I needed more, and if I couldn't get it within the bounds of my marriage, I figured I'd have to look elsewhere. So, after making my decision, I started looking for the right person. Someone who could give me the excitement I was missing, but without disrupting my life too much. It wasn't about falling in love with someone else or destroying my marriage. It was about fulfilling a need that I felt I had no other way of fulfilling. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. I didn't just wake up one day and decide to cheat. I thought it through carefully. I planned it out, just like I do with everything else in my life. And while I knew there were risks involved, I also knew that I could handle them. After all, I've always been good at managing risk. That's just who I am. I kept seeing her regularly. At first, it was everything I had expected from an affair. Exciting, thrilling, and definitely a break from the routine of my life with Emily. There was a rush in the secrecy, in sneaking around, and for a while, it felt like I was getting exactly what I had set out for. But, as the weeks went by, I couldn't ignore the feeling that was starting to grow inside me, guilt. No matter how much I tried to justify it, I knew I was betraying Emily. And that thought started to linger in the back of my mind more and more. I never talked to Emily about it, obviously, but the guilt made it harder to be around her sometimes. It wasn't that I didn't care about her. I did. I just wanted something different. And for a while, I convinced myself that what Emily didn't know wouldn't hurt her. Still, the weight of it was always there. One day, while I was on the phone with her, my lover, I mentioned something about an upcoming trip to the beach I had planned with Emily. As soon as I said it, I could sense something change in the conversation. She went quiet, and I knew what she was thinking. Maybe I hadn't fully admitted it to myself yet, but I could feel that things were starting to wind down between us. A few days after that call, we met up again, and she confronted me. She told me she was starting to develop real feelings for me, that she didn't want what we had to end. I wasn't expecting that. I mean, I knew we had something going on, but I didn't think it had gotten to the point where either of us was catching feelings. But there it was, and I could see how serious she was. I didn't know what to say at first. Part of me was flattered, but another part of me knew this was getting complicated, fast. I told her the truth. I didn't want to hurt Emily. That was never my intention. But at the same time, I didn't want to lose what I had with her, either. It was a mess. We talked for hours, trying to figure out where to go from here. It was tough, but we finally came to the decision that we needed to take a break. Maybe it wasn't the best solution, but it felt like the right one at the time. I knew deep down that this might be the end of our affair, but I wasn't ready to say it out loud just yet. I think we both knew, though. There was no way to keep this going without someone getting hurt. A few weeks went by, and I was trying to focus on my life with Emily again. I was putting the affair behind me, or at least trying to. And then, out of nowhere, Emily found out. I don't know how, but she called her. My heart sank when she told me. It was like my worst fear had just become a reality. Emily didn't come to me first. She called her, the woman I'd been seeing, and from what I gathered later, it was a devastating conversation. Emily was heartbroken, betrayed in a way that I knew couldn't be undone. She confronted me afterward, and it was brutal. She wasn't yelling or angry. She was just crushed, and that was somehow worse. She told me she didn't know if she could ever forgive me. I tried to explain myself, but what was I supposed to say? That I was bored? That I wanted something different? Nothing I said could fix it. I had hurt the woman I loved, and I had hurt myself, too. The excitement of the affair was gone, and all that was left was the damage. It's strange. When I started this whole thing, I thought I had everything planned out, like I could control the outcome. But in the end, I lost more than I ever thought I would. In the weeks that followed, I dedicated myself to making amends with Emily. I knew that my actions had deeply wounded her, and I felt an overwhelming need to show her just how sorry I was. I apologized profusely, each word dripping with sincerity, and promised to do whatever it took to make up for the pain I had caused. I remember one evening in particular, sitting across from her at the dining table, my heart racing as I poured out my feelings. I could see the hurt in her eyes. She was still grappling with anger and betrayal. But despite the tension, I sensed a flicker of hope when she finally agreed to talk to me again. We decided to start therapy together. Walking into that office for the first time was daunting. I felt exposed and vulnerable, but I knew it was necessary. The sessions were often difficult, forcing us to confront our issues head-on. Yet, as painful as it was to peel back the layers of our relationship, it was also cathartic. We learned to communicate our feelings, something we had struggled with for far too long. During those conversations, I felt like I was finally beginning to understand Emily's perspective. She shared her fears, her doubts, and the deep sense of betrayal that lingered in her heart. Over time, I could see a change in her. Emily began to forgive me, albeit slowly. I knew she wouldn't forget what I had done, and I didn't expect her to. But the fact that she was willing to consider giving our relationship another chance filled me with gratitude. Each session became a stepping stone toward rebuilding our connection, and I cherished those moments of vulnerability we shared. I promised myself that I would never do anything to hurt her again. I had learned my lesson the hard way, and the weight of my mistakes lingered heavily on my conscience. Every day, I worked on being the man she deserved, the partner who would cherish and respect her. I recognized that love requires continuous effort, and I was determined to prove my commitment to Emily. As time went on, we slowly began to rebuild our relationship. It was not without its challenges, but we faced them together, determined to make it work. We started going on dates again, which felt exhilarating and terrifying all at once. I remember our first dinner out. We sat at a cozy little restaurant, laughter spilling out between us as we reminisced about the good times. It was like rediscovering a treasure that had been buried beneath layers of hurt. With each date, we began to peel back the layers of our relationship, exploring the love that still flickered beneath the surface. During this period of rebuilding, I often reflected on my affair with her. It had been a colossal mistake, one that caused immense pain and suffering for everyone involved. I recognized the selfishness in my actions and the ripple effect they had on Emily's life. I felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility for the turmoil I had created. I was thankful that I had been given the opportunity to repair my relationship with her. This experience was a lesson I would carry with me forever, a reminder that trust is fragile and should never be taken for granted. I realized that love is not just about the highs, but also about weathering the storms together. Emily's willingness to forgive me was a testament to her strength, and I found myself falling in love with her all over again. Each day was a reminder of how fortunate I was to have her back in my life. As we moved forward, I focused on ensuring that our foundation was solid. I wanted to create a relationship that was resilient, one built on open communication and mutual respect. The journey wasn't easy, but with each passing day, I felt us growing closer. We were learning to trust each other again, to lean on one another in ways we hadn't before. It was a beautiful thing to witness, the rekindling of our love, stronger and more profound than it had ever been. I was committed to showing her that our love story was far from over. It was just beginning anew. In the weeks following my betrayal, I threw myself into making things right with Emily. Each day felt like a mountain to climb, but I was determined to show her just how sorry I was. I apologized profusely, my words spilling out with a sincerity that was both desperate and heartfelt. I made a promise to do whatever it took to make up for what I had done. Despite my efforts, I could see the hurt and anger still etched on her face, a stark reminder of the pain I had caused. Yet, after what felt like an eternity, she eventually agreed to talk to me again. That small step felt monumental, like the first light breaking through the clouds. We decided to start therapy together, and walking into that office for the first time was a mix of hope and dread. I was nervous. The thought of airing our dirty laundry in front of a stranger felt daunting. But deep down, I knew it was necessary. The sessions were challenging, pushing us to confront emotions that had been buried under the weight of betrayal and disappointment. We learned to communicate our feelings more effectively, to articulate our fears and frustrations in a safe space. I found myself opening up about my insecurities, my motivations, and the thought processes that had led me to that fateful decision. As the weeks rolled on, I could see a change in Emily. She began to forgive me, bit by bit. It was a gradual process, and I knew she would never forget what I had done, nor did I expect her to. But the fact that she was willing to entertain the idea of giving our relationship another chance filled me with hope. I remember one evening during therapy when Emily expressed her confusion about how to reconcile the love she felt for me with the pain I had caused. It was raw and emotional, but it opened the door for deeper understanding between us. I was incredibly grateful for her willingness to work through this. I realized how lucky I was to have her back in my life. Each moment we spent together in therapy felt like a gift, a chance to peel back the layers of hurt and begin anew. I promised myself that I would never do anything to hurt her again. I recognized that I had taken our love for granted, believing it would always be there, only to discover just how fragile it could be. As time passed, Emily and I slowly began to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks and awkward silences, but we were both determined to make it work. We started going on dates again, tentatively at first, but gradually we began to rediscover the love we once shared. I remember our first outing to that little cafe we used to frequent. It felt surreal to be there again, sipping coffee and laughing as we did in the past. I cherished those moments, knowing how precious they were. The deeper I delved into my thoughts, the more I recognized that my affair had been a huge mistake, one that had caused so much pain and suffering for everyone involved. I often reflected on the events that led to my infidelity, grappling with the realization that I had jeopardized everything that truly mattered. I felt a mix of remorse and gratitude. Remorse for the hurt I had caused Emily, but gratitude that I had been given a chance to repair our relationship. It was a lesson I would carry with me for the rest of my life, a stark reminder of the importance of loyalty, trust, and open communication. As we worked through our issues, I began to understand the depths of Emily's love for me. Her willingness to forgive and move forward filled me with a sense of responsibility. I knew that it was my duty to prove to her that I could be the partner she deserved. I was committed to showing her that I had learned from my mistakes. With each passing day, I made small efforts to reconnect, whether it was leaving sweet notes around the house or planning surprise outings. I wanted to demonstrate my love and commitment in tangible ways. Ultimately, the journey of rebuilding our relationship was filled with ups and downs, but it was also an opportunity for growth. I found myself falling in love with Emily again, this time with a deeper appreciation for what we had built together. The trust we were rebuilding was fragile but beautiful, and I felt determined to nurture it with care. As we moved forward, I held on to the belief that our love story was far from over. It was merely beginning a new chapter, and I was ready to write it alongside Emily, committed to ensuring it would be one filled with love, respect, and unwavering loyalty.